Welcome to Iraqi Dinar Update, your go-to source for the latest news, expert insights, and real-time developments on Iraq's currency, economy, and financial reforms. Whether you're a long-time investor or just curious about the dinar, you're in the right place. The recent statement by economic expert and banking advisor Salam al-Nusayri underscores a profound shift underway in Iraq's economic strategy, especially as it pertains to the banking sector's modernization and the broader goal of achieving full membership in the World Trade Organization, WTO. According to al-Nusayri, the Central Bank of Iraq's continued pursuit of banking reform and institutional development is now acting as a catalyst to re-energize Iraq's previously stalled accession to the WTO. While Iraq has technically held observer status with the organization for many years, progress toward full accession had largely stagnated due to a range of political, economic, and administrative hurdles. Despite the country's expressed intentions and incremental steps forward in the past, little movement was visible on the global stage in terms of completing the full range of requirements necessary for WTO membership. This prolonged state of suspension, marked by bureaucratic red tape, internal political instability, and the daunting task of aligning Iraq's economic framework with global standards, had long left many skeptical that any real movement was happening at all. Yet now, suddenly, the conversation has returned, with greater intensity and transparency than in prior years. The current discourse has taken on a notably optimistic tone. It reflects a deeper and more public commitment by Iraq's financial authorities, not just to the idea of reform in general, but to the specific, concrete implementation of international best practices. This change is not happening in a vacuum. It comes at a time when monetary reform is gaining significant traction inside and outside of Iraq. Observers, particularly those watching the central bank's moves, have noted the volume and frequency with which Iraqi officials and financial technocrats are discussing the modernization of monetary policy, the simplification and digitization of the payments system, anti-money laundering measures, and the liberalization of the foreign exchange market. These are not superficial updates. They represent systemic overhauls that touch every part of the banking and financial ecosystem. The timing of this renewed public narrative is indeed curious and deserves closer examination. For years, Iraq has functioned under a dual-track economy, one deeply rooted in its legacy dependence on oil exports, and another struggling to catch up to 21st-century expectations around transparency, governance, and market efficiency. The country's economic planners have frequently spoken about diversifying away from oil and encouraging private sector development, yet these aspirations often clashed with structural realities on the ground. Now, as Iraq takes more concrete steps toward digital transformation and opens its banking system to regional and international partnerships, we are witnessing a strategic convergence of goals. The central bank's reforms are no longer confined to domestic policy initiatives. They are now positioned as integral steps in a broader campaign to elevate Iraq's position in the international economic order. The conversation surrounding the return of the dinar to its former glory is also becoming increasingly mainstream. What was once confined to speculative forums or the purview of economic analysts is now being openly discussed in both local and international circles. The phrase itself, returning the dinar to its former strength, speaks to more than just nostalgia. It reflects a larger vision of national pride, economic sovereignty, and Iraq's rightful place among trading nations. In the 1970s and early 1980s, the Iraqi dinar was one of the strongest currencies in the region, trading favorably against the US dollar and symbolizing a robust, if oil-dependent, economy. The decades of war, sanctions, and occupation that followed eroded not only the currency's value but also public confidence in state institutions. As such, a restored dinar is about more than economics. It is about psychological and symbolic renewal. The process of bringing the dinar back to strength is necessarily intertwined with structural reforms. Currency strength is not something that can be legislated or proclaimed. It must be underpinned by real economic fundamentals, including confidence in monetary policy, foreign reserve adequacy, export competitiveness, and a vibrant private sector. The central bank appears to understand this reality, and has thus anchored many of its reforms in globally accepted norms. These include ensuring compliance with international anti-money laundering, AML, and counter-terrorist financing, CTF, frameworks, enhancing central bank independence, and enforcing prudential regulations across commercial banks. Such measures align closely with WTO entry criteria, which require not just liberalized trade policies but also robust institutional frameworks capable of enforcing trade, financial, and legal obligations. There is also a broader narrative to consider, the story of a country attempting to reassert itself on the world stage after decades of isolation, conflict, and mismanagement. The dinar's rehabilitation and Iraq's WTO accession are not merely economic goals. They are deeply political acts of restoration. They represent a nation's attempt to rebuild its credibility and chart a course toward a more prosperous, self-sufficient future. For Iraqis, especially those old enough to remember the country's economic standing before the 1990s, the prospect of a strong, respected dinar carries immense symbolic weight. For younger generations, who have grown up amid instability and economic uncertainty, the reforms now being undertaken offer a glimpse of what a more functional and integrated Iraq might look like. None of this is to suggest that the path forward will be easy or without setbacks. Institutional inertia, political disagreements, and legacy economic problems continue to pose significant challenges. However, the difference now appears to be intent and direction. By framing banking reform as a strategic asset in international engagement. In conclusion, al-Nusayri's comment is not merely a throwaway line about the impact of banking reform. It encapsulates a broader strategy aimed at reclaiming Iraq's place in the global economic architecture. By openly linking domestic reform with WTO accession, and by actively working to restore the dignity and purchasing power of the Iraqi dinar, the central bank is not only rebuilding financial infrastructure, it is rewriting Iraq's economic future. That this conversation is happening now, after years of dormancy, is no coincidence. It reflects a deliberate, calculated, and increasingly coordinated effort to turn decades of hardship into a springboard for transformation. Whether through digital payments, cross-border financial interoperability, or the eventual floating of a revalued currency, the signs all point in the same direction. Iraq is on the move. The world would do well to pay attention. Thanks for tuning into Iraqi Dinar Update. If you found this content helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a beat on Iraq's evolving financial landscape. Stay informed and stay ready.